Imagine standing alone in a fog-drenched lighthouse when suddenly you hear the faint laughter of children who drowned over a century ago. Or picture a piano playing in the dead of night, except there's no one there to touch the keys. These aren't just ghost stories, they're real accounts from America's most haunted lighthouses. In this video, we're uncovering 10 true tales that will keep you up at night. Lighthouses where history turned into horror. Which one's the creepiest? Stick around to find out, because you won't believe what's waiting at number 1. The Marblehead Lighthouse has stood for centuries, its beams slicing through the darkness of Lake Erie's treacherous waters. But when the storms roll in, something else lurks within its walls. Something cold, something waiting. In the brutal winter of 1903, a young lighthouse keeper faced a devastating blizzard. The winds howled, the ice thickened, but he had a duty to keep the light burning. Wrapped in a heavy coat, he fought his way up the spiral stairs, frost biting his skin. But as the storm raged, the cold became unbearable. His limbs stiffened, his breath slowed. By morning, his frozen body was found curled at the base of the tower, his frostbitten hands still reaching for the door. For over a century, when blizzards strike Marblehead, knocking sounds echo from the lighthouse door. 3 loud bangs, just like the last desperate attempts of a man trying to get inside. Some who enter during winter feel an icy breath on their neck, even when the windows are sealed tight. Others report a heavy cold presence, lingering just beyond sight. One of the most chilling encounters happened in 2018 when a visitor decided to film the lighthouse during a fierce storm. As the wind howled, their camera caught something unexplainable. 3 deafening knocks. The sound was clear, forceful, and impossible. Because at that moment, the lighthouse was completely empty. Locals say he still walks the frozen grounds, forever tending his post, forever trying to escape the cold. And if you ever stand at Marblehead Lighthouse during a winter storm, listen carefully, because somewhere in the howling wind beneath the crackling ice, you might just hear the desperate knocks of a man trapped in time. Perched on a lonely volcanic rock, the Point Sur Lighthouse has guarded California's rugged coast for over a century. But within its thick walls and fog-drenched cliffs, a grief-stricken presence lingers. A spirit forever searching for what the sea stole away. In the early 1900s, a lighthouse keeper's wife and children set sail toward Monterey, promising to return before nightfall. But the ocean had other plans. A violent storm struck, and their small vessel was crushed against the jagged rocks near the lighthouse. The keeper could do nothing but watch in horror as the waves claimed his family. He remained at Point Sur for years after, but those who knew him said he was never the same. His light still shined, but his heart had been swallowed by the sea. Decades later, visitors began reporting a ghostly figure standing near the cliffs, a woman in a long coat staring out to sea. She never speaks, never moves, only watches, as if waiting for a ship that will never return. At night, when the fog rolls in, people swear they can hear crying on the wind, soft, sorrowful wails carried across the waves. The spirits of Point Sur do more than just appear and vanish. They reach out. In 2012, a tour guide was locking up for the night when they felt a cold, skeletal hand press firmly on their shoulder. They turned, expecting to see a visitor who had strayed from the group. But there was no one there. The room was empty, the air frigid, and in the distance, the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore. Even today, those who visit Point Sur Lighthouse report doors opening on their own, unseen figures moving through the mist, and the feeling of watchful eyes following their every step. And if you stand on the cliffs at night listening carefully, you might just hear it, the whispers of a woman lost in time, a mother forever waiting for her family to return. Beneath the rolling fog of the Jersey Shore, the Cape May Lighthouse stands tall, a beacon of safety against the deadly tides. But for those who know its past, it is also a beacon of sorrow, loss, and something far more chilling. In the 1880s, a keeper's wife lived within these walls, waiting each night for her husband's return from the sea. But one fateful storm, his ship never came back. Days turned to weeks, then months. Hope faded. The grief was too much. One night, she climbed the spiral stairs to the lantern room, tied a rope to the iron railing, and stepped off the edge. By sunrise, the new lightkeeper found her swaying gently in the morning breeze. For more than a century, visitors have seen her ghost, a shadowy figure standing in the lantern room, swaying, just like she did on that tragic morning. On calm nights when the air is still, a rope can be heard creaking, as if something unseen is shifting in the darkness above. And in 1995, a tourist took a seemingly innocent photograph of the lighthouse. But when the film was developed, a faint woman in a flowing dress appeared at the very top, though the tower was completely empty at the time. Even today, those who climb the Cape May Lighthouse report an overwhelming feeling of despair as they near the lantern room. Some hear soft weeping, while others feel an invisible brush of cold air against their skin, as if someone is still standing there, waiting for a husband who will never return. And if you find yourself at Cape May on a quiet, windless night, listen closely. You just might hear it, the ghostly creak of a rope, and the whisper of a woman lost in time. Along the desolate shores of Lake Michigan, the Silshwa Point Lighthouse stands as a lonely sentinel against the relentless waves. But for over a century, its halls have been filled with more than just the sound of the wind. They hold the lingering presence of a man who never moved on. Joseph Townsend, the lighthouse keeper in the early 1900s, took great pride in his duties. He spent his days tending the light, maintaining the tower, and enjoying his one great pleasure, cigars. In 1910, he passed away within these very walls, but his spirit remains, and so does the unmistakable scent of his favorite cigars. Visitors and staff alike report the same eerie phenomenon, the thick aroma of tobacco smoke drifting through the air, despite the fact that smoking has been banned for decades. Some claim to smell it in the stairwell, others in the keeper's quarters, but the most unsettling reports come from those who turn a corner and see the faint outline of a man in the shadows. Along with the phantom scent, Townsend makes his presence known in other ways. Heavy doors slam without warning, objects move on their own, and strange whispers drift through the empty hallways. In 2008, a paranormal investigation team set up cameras inside the lighthouse, hoping to catch proof of the haunting. What they captured was chilling, a cloud of thick, swirling mist appearing from nowhere, then vanishing just as quickly. And as they reviewed their footage, they noticed something else. A deep inhale, followed by a slow, deliberate exhale. To this day, the Silshwa Point Lighthouse remains one of Michigan's most haunted locations. Travelers who pass by at night report a shadow in the tower window, a man watching, waiting, and if you ever visit, be warned. If you smell cigar smoke in the air, you are not alone.
Rising above the Texas coastline, the Port Isabel Lighthouse has guided sailors for over a century and a half. But within its walls, the echoes of war and betrayal still linger. Some say the ghost of a fallen soldier still guards his post, long after death. During the Civil War, Port Isabel was a strategic stronghold, with soldiers stationed at the lighthouse to keep watch. One fateful night, a Confederate sentry was ambushed and killed by Union troops. But those who have dared to visit at night say he never left. Many have reported seeing a shadowy figure pacing the catwalk, a lantern flickering in his grasp. The light swings back and forth as if the soldier is still keeping watch, still waiting for an enemy that has long since vanished. But when you try to get closer, he disappears. In 2015, a visitor took out their phone, aiming to capture the eerie silence of the lighthouse at night. When they played the recording back, their blood ran cold. A voice, distant but clear, whispered, "Who's there?" They had been alone, or at least they thought they were. To this day, visitors report phantom footsteps echoing on the spiral staircase, a cold presence pressing against their backs as they climb. Some claim to hear breathing behind them, only to turn and find nothing but shadows. And on nights when the wind is still, a lone lantern light can be seen swaying at the top. A ghostly soldier forever standing guard. Towering over the treacherous waters of the Atlantic, Cape Hatteras Lighthouse has stood as a warning to sailors for over a century. But some who were lost to the sea never truly left. The ghost of the graveyard of the Atlantic. For centuries, the waters near Cape Hatteras have claimed thousands of ships, earning the name the Graveyard of the Atlantic. One of the most chilling legends is that of a 19th century sailor, a man who drowned just offshore, but whose spirit still climbs the lighthouse stairs. Visitors and rangers alike have witnessed the same eerie sight. A man, drenched in seawater, slowly ascending the spiral staircase. His boots leave noisy, wet footprints, and a salty breeze fills the air, as if the ocean itself has followed him inside. But when anyone approaches, he vanishes. In 1999, a park ranger working late inside the lighthouse spotted something impossible: the dripping figure of a sailor, standing at the landing, water pooling beneath him. Frozen in place, the ranger could only watch as the man turned and walked straight into the wall, gone, without a trace. To this day, those who visit Cape Hatteras swear they aren't alone. Some report feeling cold, wet hands brush against them in the narrow stairwell. Others claim they smell seawater even on the driest of days. And then there are those who hear footsteps behind them. But when they turn, there's no one there, only the endless crashing of the waves and the whispers of a sailor who never made it home. Perched on the rugged cliffs of Newport, Oregon, the Yaquina Bay Lighthouse has stood against time and tide. But beneath its weathered beams and flickering light, a tragic presence lingers, a ghostly girl, forever searching, forever lost. In 1874, a teenage girl named Kate was last seen wandering near the lighthouse. Some say she fell from the cliffs, swallowed by the raging sea. Others believe something far more sinister happened. But the truth remains unknown because Kate's body was never found. Locals say her spirit never left. For over a century, a figure in a white dress has been seen drifting along the cliffs, her silhouette barely visible in the fading light. Some say she moves toward the edge, staring into the abyss before vanishing into thin air. On stormy nights, when the wind howls through the trees, the air carries something else: a scream. A cry so chilling, so full of terror, that even seasoned lighthouse keepers refuse to stay after dark. In the 1980s, paranormal investigators set up audio equipment inside the lighthouse. They expected silence. Instead, they captured something terrifying: faint, desperate cries, a voice pleading from the darkness. No one was inside the lighthouse at the time. To this day, visitors report feeling an unseen presence, a cold hand brushing their arm as they walk the grounds. Some claim to hear whispers in the wind, Kate calling out for help. But the most terrifying encounters happen when the fog rolls in, thick and suffocating. Because if you listen closely, you might hear it. A girl's voice, crying, begging. And if you turn toward the cliffs, you might see her. High on the cliffs of Lake Superior, where the waves crash violently against the rocks, Split Rock Lighthouse stands as a silent guardian. But in the swirling mist and howling winds, something else watches from the shadows, a keeper who never left. In the 1940s, a brutal storm rolled in from the lake, swallowing the sky in darkness. The lighthouse keeper, an experienced man who had weathered many tempests, was last seen heading toward the tower just as the winds turned violent. No one saw him leave. No body was ever found. Some say he fell into the raging lake. Others whisper that the storm took him, dragging him into something beyond the world of the living. But whatever happened that night, he never truly left. For decades, keepers and visitors have seen the figure, a tall, shadowy man emerging from the mist near the lantern room. He stands motionless, watching. Some have tried to approach, but the moment they blink, he's gone. Even more unsettling, tools left in the lighthouse move on their own. Wrenches disappear, only to reappear days later in places no one had been. Doors creak open in the dead of night, as if someone is still tending to the light. In 2005, a visitor snapped a photo inside the lighthouse, expecting nothing unusual. But when they reviewed the image, their blood ran cold. Standing in the empty lantern room was the unmistakable figure of a man in a raincoat, staring out into the stormy night. To this day, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, some say you can hear footsteps echoing up the lighthouse stairs. Others swear they see a figure standing by the light, looking out over Lake Superior, waiting for something or someone that will never return. Perhaps he's trying to finish his final watch. The Key West Lighthouse stands against the endless blue of the Florida sky, its beacon cutting through the humid air. But some say there's more than just the light watching over the island, something trapped in the tower, forever reliving a fatal mistake. In the 1880s, lighthouse keeper William was known for two things: his dedication to the light and his love for the bottle. He often drank deep into the night, his footsteps unsteady as he climbed the 88 spiral steps to tend the beacon. But one night, whether from too much rum or sheer misfortune, William lost his footing. The silence of the lighthouse was broken by a sickening crash. His body slammed into the stone floor below. He was gone in an instant, but did he ever truly leave? For over a century, visitors have heard his footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing on the stairs. But when they turn, no one is there. Even in the sweltering summer heat, a sudden icy chill sweeps through the tower, as if something unseen is breathing down their necks. But the most terrifying encounter? The man at the top. In the 1990s, a group of tourists reached the top of the lighthouse and saw him. A man in old-fashioned clothing, standing near the railing, his back turned, gazing out over the ocean. They assumed he was part of the tour. Then, without a sound, he disappeared. No footsteps, no movement, just gone. To this day, William remains, still climbing the stairs, still walking the halls, still staring out to sea. Some believe he's looking for a way out. Others say he doesn't even know he's dead. Along the misty shores of Erie, Pennsylvania, the Presque Isle Lighthouse stands tall, its beacon piercing through the fog. But within its historic walls lingers a heartbreaking presence, the spirit of a young girl who never left. Built in 1873, the lighthouse became home to many keepers and their families. Among them was a keeper's daughter, a lively child who played within the lighthouse's walls, her laughter once filling the air. But tragedy struck when a sudden illness took her life inside the very tower she called home. The once joyful halls turned silent, her presence fading, at least in life. But some say the little girl never truly left. Visitors to the Presque Isle Lighthouse often bring small toys, unknowingly offering them to the unseen child. What happens next is chilling. The toys, carefully placed on shelves or tables, are found moved, rearranged, or mysteriously relocated. Some have even reported hearing soft giggles echoing through the keeper's quarters, though no child is in sight. Even more unsettling are the unexplained flickering lights. Electricians have found no faults, yet the lights turn on and off at will, as if a playful hand is at work. In 2010, a paranormal investigation team set up recording equipment near the keeper's quarters, hoping to capture evidence of the spectral presence. What they discovered left them shaken. A child's voice, faint but unmistakable, whispering a single word. Stay. Was it an invitation? A plea for company? Or a warning? No one knows. But those who have heard it never forget. The ghostly child of Presque Isle continues to linger, playing unseen games and leaving her mark on the lighthouse that was once her home. Her laughter, her whispers, and the flickering lights are reminders that some souls never truly leave, especially those who left too soon. Nestled along the shores of Whitehall, Michigan, White River Light Station has long been a beacon for sailors, guiding them through the treacherous waters of Lake Michigan. Yet, beyond its shining light, the station harbors a story of unwavering dedication and a spirit bound by duty, the ghost of Captain William Robinson, the lighthouse's first keeper. Captain William Robinson served as the keeper of the White River Light Station from its inception in 1875 until his retirement in 1919. But even after his official duties ended, Robinson could not bring himself to leave the lighthouse that had been his life's work. His attachment to the station was so profound that he remained, refusing to abandon the place he had safeguarded for so many years. When Captain Robinson died in 1927, his spirit seemingly refused to depart, lingering within the lighthouse he had tended to for decades. It's said that his devotion to the light transcended death, forever tying him to the tower and its surroundings. Visitors and staff of the White River Light Station have reported hearing footsteps echoing on the stairs, the unmistakable sound of creaking floorboards as though someone is still walking the halls. Those who have ventured into the lighthouse at night often report a cold chill and a sense of being watched, but when they turn to look, no one is there. Perhaps most unsettling of all is the figure of Captain Robinson, which has been spotted by museum staff in the lantern room, a shadowy presence gazing out over the lake, just as he did in life. His form, dressed in old-fashioned lighthouse keeper's attire, appears briefly before vanishing into the ether, leaving behind only a lingering sense of quiet resolve. Though the light continues to shine, it's clear that Captain Robinson's watch is far from over. His spirit remains tied to the White River Light Station, a loyal guardian of the lake's waters, ever faithful to his duty. Set against the rugged coastline of Owl's Head, Maine, Owl's Head Lighthouse has long been a steadfast sentinel for sailors. But beneath its guiding light lies a tragic tale that has etched itself into the very walls of the tower. The spirits of a beloved dog and a mysterious woman haunt its grounds, forever tethered to the lighthouse's eerie history. In the 1920s, the lighthouse keeper had a faithful companion named Spot, a dog who was as much a part of the lighthouse as the keeper himself. One fateful day, Spot drowned in the turbulent waters below the cliffside, a tragic loss that left a void at the lighthouse. Since that day, Spot's barks, echoing through the empty tower, can still be heard, a reminder of the loyal dog who once kept the keeper company through lonely nights. Visitors and staff alike report hearing phantom barks drifting through the lighthouse, especially on foggy days when the air is thick with the scent of the sea. The sound is unmistakable, a bark that comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. Spot's spirit refuses to leave, forever chasing the waves, his loyalty unwavering even in death. In 1985, an extraordinary event occurred at Owl's Head Lighthouse, further cementing the belief that its spirits are ever watchful. A child playing near the cliff's edge nearly fell to his death when a mysterious woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, appeared out of nowhere. The woman grabbed the child and pulled him back from the brink, disappearing just as quickly as she had arrived. Witnesses who saw the incident described the woman as a ghostly figure, one who seemed to belong to a time long past. Many believe her to be the spirit of a keeper's wife, her maternal instincts guiding her even in death. Both Spot and the mysterious woman remain tied to the lighthouse, their spirits bound to the tower's light. The barks of Spot can still be heard in the distance, while the shadow of the woman lingers in the periphery of the lighthouse, watching over those who walk its grounds. Would you dare to visit, knowing that these spirits continue their eternal vigil, protecting the lighthouse and its visitors from the dangers that still lurk in the shadows? Perched on the rugged cliffs of Pescadero, California, Pigeon Point Lighthouse has been a guiding light for sailors for over a century. But the lighthouse's history is marked by a tragic death that continues to haunt its shores, an unfinished story carried by the winds of the Pacific. In 1896, lighthouse keeper J.J. Clark found himself tragically plummeting to his death from the steep cliffs near the lighthouse. Whether it was an accident or a desperate act of fate remains a mystery. What is known, however, is that his life ended too soon, his body crashing against the rocks below, the sound of his fall swallowed by the howling winds of the stormy coast. Since then, J.J. Clark's spirit has remained anchored to the place where he met his untimely end. His ghost, known as the Blue Man, due to his distinct blue uniform, has been spotted numerous times, particularly during the fierce storms that ravage the coast. The sightings of the Blue Man are as chilling as they are fleeting. Visitors on stormy nights have reported seeing a shadowy figure dressed in a blue coat standing at the edge of the cliff. The ghost of J.J. Clark appears suddenly, as though materializing from the mist, always motioning toward the abyss below. Along with his eerie presence, visitors have reported a cold chill sweeping over them, followed by a voice, a deep, gravelly whisper that warns them to stay away from the edge. His voice, echoing through the wind, carries the weight of someone who knows the dangers of the cliffside all too well. J.J. Clark's spirit lingers, bound to the lighthouse, watching over the cliffs where he met his end. The lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the fog and storm, but the Blue Man's presence remains, forever bound to warn those who wander too close to the precipice. Would you dare to step closer to the edge, knowing a spectral keeper stands guard, protecting you from the very fate he could not escape? Standing tall since 1736, Tybee Island Lighthouse has been a beacon of hope for countless sailors navigating the dangerous waters off Georgia's coast. But beneath its comforting glow, this historic structure hides a dark secret, a ghostly presence that refuses to be extinguished. In the mid-19th century, the lighthouse keeper, whose name has been lost to time, found himself at the center of a brutal storm that lashed Tybee Island with violent winds and torrential rain. As the tempest raged, the keeper worked tirelessly to ensure the light remained strong. But the fury of the storm proved too much. In the midst of the chaos, the keeper was swept away by the crashing waves, his life tragically claimed by the very forces he sought to guide others through. Despite his death, his spirit remains tethered to the lighthouse, and it seems the keeper is not alone in his restless journey. Visitors and staff report unsettling phenomena throughout the lighthouse. Lanterns light up on their own, casting an eerie glow in the darkened halls. On the catwalk, shadowy figures are often seen pacing back and forth, their movements deliberate and sorrowful. One of the most chilling encounters took place in the 1990s, when a paranormal investigation team captured an image of a misty figure ascending the stairs, shrouded in fog and shadows. The apparition's form was ethereal, and despite the stormy conditions outside, the air in the photo was eerily still, the image of a ghost bound to its past. Even today, the Tybee Island Lighthouse continues to cast its light over the dark waters, but it also casts something else. A shadow. Cold drafts, the sensation of being watched, and the occasional glimpse of a shadowy figure can still be felt by those who visit. The keeper's work is far from over. Would you dare to climb the stairs knowing the ghost of a lost keeper may still be watching you from the catwalk above, never able to leave the lighthouse he gave his life to protect? New London Ledge Lighthouse stands sentinel against the ever-shifting tides of Connecticut's coast, but this lighthouse harbors a tragic past, one that continues to haunt its very walls. For decades, the restless ghost of keeper Ernie Hansen has terrorized those who dare to stay too long. In 1939, Ernie Hansen, a dedicated lighthouse keeper, saw his life unravel when his wife left him. Heartbroken and crushed by the weight of his loneliness, Ernie found solace only in the isolation of the lighthouse, until the sorrow became too much to bear. On one dark evening, the anguish that had built within him boiled over. Desperate and distraught, Ernie jumped to his death, plunging into the icy waters below. His tragic end left behind an unsettling mark on the lighthouse, an imprint of pain that refuses to fade. Ever since that fateful night, Ernie's ghost has been reported in the lighthouse, his presence felt in the most unsettling of ways. Loud slamming doors, foghorns blaring at all hours, and mysterious movement of bedding are just a few of the eerie phenomena witnessed by those unlucky enough to spend the night. Coast Guard crews stationed at the lighthouse in the 1980s were among the most affected by Ernie's restless spirit. In one particularly harrowing incident, a group of guards were startled awake by the sound of whispers, muffled and chilling. When they investigated, they found nothing but an empty, still lighthouse, and the whispers continued as if Ernie were beckoning them. Unable to withstand the oppressive atmosphere, the crew fled the lighthouse in terror, leaving behind a place that seemed to breathe with grief and rage. Despite the passage of years, Ernie's spirit is far from at rest. Visitors and crews alike continue to report hearing footsteps echoing in the dark, feeling cold drafts, and experiencing the overwhelming sensation of being watched. Others claim to hear the faint whisper of Ernie's voice, pleading for an escape from his torment. The new London Ledge Lighthouse still stands today, its beam cutting through the fog, but the cries of a tormented soul remain in its shadow. Would you dare to stay the night, knowing that Ernie Hansen's ghost might still be seeking a peace that never came? Heceta Head Lighthouse, perched high above the rugged cliffs of Florence, Oregon, has long been a guiding light for sailors navigating the treacherous waters of the Pacific. But the lighthouse is also home to a ghostly presence, a sorrowful specter whose grief has lingered for over a century. In 1894, when the lighthouse was first constructed, the keeper and his wife, a woman named Rue, settled into the isolated beauty of Heceta Head. It was a life of solitude, surrounded only by the sea and the windswept coast. But their happiness was short-lived. The couple's beloved child, a young girl, tragically passed away, leaving Rue heartbroken and consumed with grief. Alone in the lighthouse, with the crashing waves as her only companion, she would often wander the tower and the surrounding grounds, lost in her mourning. As the years passed, Rue's sorrow turned to madness. The lighthouse keepers who came after her whispered about her restless spirit. They spoke of her wandering the halls at night, forever searching for the daughter she lost. Her presence tangible yet invisible, as if the walls themselves held the weight of her sorrow. Today, Rue's spirit is said to still haunt the lighthouse, her spectral form seen by many who venture near. Those who stay at the nearby bed and breakfast report hearing the sound of furniture being rearranged in the dead of night, only to find the rooms exactly as they were when they went to bed. Some guests have even spotted Rue's ghost, a gray-haired woman in a Victorian dress, standing at the window, staring out toward the ocean, her eyes filled with the sorrow of years gone by. Others have reported feeling a sudden coldness in the air, as if Rue's presence is watching them, forever trapped in her grief. The most eerie encounters occur at dusk, when the fading light casts long shadows across the lighthouse walls, and the scent of flowers, Rue's favorite bloom, seems to linger in the rooms. The Heceta Head Lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the misty coastline, but Rue's ghost continues her endless vigil, waiting for a reunion with the child she lost. Would you dare enter the lighthouse after dark, knowing the spirit of a grieving mother is never far behind? Perched on a rocky outcrop off Crescent City's coast, the Battery Point Lighthouse has stood against raging storms and crashing waves since 1856. Its beacon has guided sailors through the treacherous Pacific waters, but within its walls, something unnatural lingers, a ghostly presence born from the sea itself. For years, lighthouse keepers braved isolation and violent storms, tending to the flame that ensured ships stayed clear of the deadly coast. But one storm in particular changed everything. During a massive tsunami, one keeper, whose name has been lost to time, was swept away, his body swallowed by the churning waters. Some say he tried to save the lighthouse, refusing to abandon his post even as the waves consumed him. Others whisper that his soul never left, forever bound to the place he called home. Ever since, strange occurrences plague the lighthouse. Footsteps echo in empty hallways, heavy and deliberate, like the measured steps of a keeper making his rounds. Objects move on their own. Chairs scrape across the floor in the dead of night, and the faint scent of salt water lingers in rooms with closed windows. But the most chilling encounter came in 1964, during another violent storm. A lighthouse docent, taking shelter as the wind howled outside, glanced toward the window, only to see a shadowy figure standing in the lantern room. His coat dripped with seawater, his eyes fixed on the raging ocean beyond. The docent later described the apparition to historians, and the details matched the description of the long-dead keeper. But when he turned for a second look, the figure was gone. Visitors today still report sudden cold chills, the sensation of being watched, and the eerie feeling that someone is walking beside them, though no one is there. Some believe the keeper's ghost is watching over the lighthouse, protecting it from future disasters. Others say he's still trying to finish the job that death interrupted. The Battery Point Lighthouse still stands, its light cutting through the darkness. But within its halls, the phantom keeper remains on duty, forever trapped between the land and the sea. Would you dare walk its corridors at night, knowing you are not alone? The Seguin Island Lighthouse rises like a lonely sentinel above the stormy waters of the Maine coast, its light cutting through the endless fog. But beyond its beacon lies a dark tale of madness, murder, and a ghostly song that refuses to fade. In the 1850s, an isolated lighthouse keeper brought his young wife to Seguin Island, hoping for a quiet life. But the days were long, the island was desolate, and loneliness crept into their bones like the cold Atlantic wind. To pass the time, the keeper gifted his wife a piano, her only solace in the endless silence. She played the same song, over and over, day after day, until the walls themselves seemed to hum with its tune. There was no escape. The monotonous melody gnawed at the keeper's sanity, twisting his mind into something dark and violent. One night, as the same notes filled the lighthouse once more, he snapped. He grabbed an axe. He found his wife at the piano, her fingers pressing the keys with rhythmic innocence. And with a single wild swing, the music stopped. But the bloodshed did not. After butchering his wife, the keeper, now consumed by horror and guilt, turned the axe on himself, leaving the lighthouse forever stained with tragedy. The piano is long gone, but its music never left. Visitors to Seguin Island report hearing soft, ghostly piano notes drifting through the fog, the same eerie melody repeating just as it did before the murders. Lighthouse keepers who came after spoke of cold spots, whispers in the wind, and the shadow of a man standing near the cliffs, staring out to sea. Some claim they've seen a woman in a flowing white dress wandering the lighthouse grounds, her sorrowful figure disappearing into the mist. Others, while staying overnight, have awoken to the sensation of invisible fingers pressing piano keys beside them, despite the room being empty. One fisherman, anchored near the island at night, swore he heard a piercing scream carried on the wind, a woman's final desperate cry. The Seguin Island Lighthouse still stands, its light a lonely reminder of the madness that once consumed it. But if you ever visit, be warned. The song still lingers, played by unseen hands, echoing across the water. The Point Lookout Lighthouse stands at the meeting of the Potomac River and Chesapeake Bay, its beam cutting through the mist like a spectral eye. But beneath its guiding light, a darkness lingers, a sorrowful, restless presence born of war, death, and suffering. During the Civil War, Point Lookout wasn't just a lighthouse. It was a hospital and a prison camp. Over 4,000 men perished here, their bodies swallowed by disease, starvation, and despair. The wounded soldiers, both Union and Confederate, groaned in pain as they lay on makeshift cots, their fevers rising while the sea air carried the scent of decay. And when death finally took them, their souls never truly left. The lighthouse keepers who came after the war spoke of phantom footsteps echoing in empty halls, doors slamming shut on their own, and the sound of disembodied moans in the dead of night. Some reported seeing a soldier in a tattered uniform, his face twisted in anguish, standing at the foot of their beds. only to vanish into the shadows. One keeper's wife swore she saw a man with hollow eyes watching her from the stairwell, his form half-transparent. But the moment she blinked, he was gone. The spirits of dead prisoners still roam the grounds, their agony imprinted on the walls. Ghostly figures have been spotted near the shore, their backs turned as if waiting for rescue that never came. In 1980, a Coast Guard crew stationed at Point Lookout set out to document the strange occurrences. Armed with a tape recorder, they wandered the lighthouse, asking questions into the darkness. When they played the tape back, a single chilling phrase emerged. "Get out!" The voice was low, guttural, filled with a rage that crossed the veil of death itself. But the crew wasn't alone. Multiple investigations over the years have captured similar ghostly warnings, as if the spirits trapped in Point Lookout are desperate to keep the living away from their eternal torment. Today, Point Lookout Lighthouse is one of America's most haunted locations. Those who step inside report an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as if unseen eyes are watching their every move. Some claim to feel icy fingers brush against their skin, while others hear a distant cry of pain that never fades. The lighthouse still stands, its light piercing the darkness. But within its walls, the ghosts of war, disease, and suffering remain, forever trapped between the tides of the living and the dead. The year was 1873, and the towering St. Augustine Lighthouse stood as a sentinel over the dark, churning waters of Florida's coast. Below its imposing height, a tragedy unfolded, one that would leave an eternal imprint on the land. Hezekiah Pittee, the lighthouse keeper, had moved his family to the station as construction efforts expanded. His 3 young daughters, Mary, Eliza, and Anne, often played near the grounds, their laughter echoing against the salty breeze. One fateful afternoon, as they rowed a wooden cart used to transport materials, a sharp turn sent them plunging into the icy bay below. Their tiny hands thrashed against the water, but the weight of the cart pulled them under. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The lighthouse lost its light that night, not from the lantern, but from the souls that had departed. Years passed, but the Pittee sisters never left. Visitors of the St. Augustine Lighthouse spoke of eerie, childlike giggling drifting through the air when no children were present. Small shadows darted between corridors, always just out of sight. Some reported feeling cold, ghostly fingers tugging at their shirts, as if unseen children were desperately trying to get their attention. But the most terrifying encounters came in the dead of night. Lighthouse workers heard faint splashing from the shore, the unmistakable sound of something struggling beneath the waves. Others swore they saw wet footprints appearing inside the lighthouse, leading up the spiral staircase before vanishing into nothingness. The investigation, a voice from beyond. In 2001, a paranormal research team from the Atlantic Paranormal Society, TAPS, set up an overnight investigation. Equipped with EVP, electronic voice phenomena recorders, they wandered the lighthouse, asking questions into the silence. The responses? Chilling. Upon playback, a faint, desperate child's voice whispered through the static. "Help me!" The investigators froze. The voice was unmistakably young, a girl's plea from beyond the grave. Was it Mary, Eliza, or Anne? Were they still reliving their watery fate, forever trapped between worlds? To this day, visitors continue to experience unexplainable encounters. Some say they hear the cart's wooden wheels creaking, as if it's still rolling toward disaster. Others claim that, if you stand near the lighthouse stairs at dusk, you might feel a small hand slip into yours, cold, wet, and seeking comfort.